Judy from Patterns for Pirates, and I'm going to go over some suggested fabrics for the new vintage jumper. These fabrics will work for any of the options, the pants, shorts, or the skirted little dress option. I'm going to start with probably what will be the most used, which is a stretch denim. You can find all different kinds of stretch denims. Some have quite a bit of stretch, some have very little mechanical stretch. You can use stretch denim with pretty little stretch. The more stretch it has, the more comfortable it will be, especially if you tend to move around a lot, if you're sewing them for youth and they're going to play on playgrounds and things like that. The more stretch they have, just the more stretch you're going to have wearing them. So I just have pulled a couple of my stretch denims to show all the different kinds you can have. I got this a while ago at my local Joann's in the doodles section. It has quite a bit of stretch horizontally, none vertically. Almost all of the stretch wovens, which is what this is drafted for, will have 0 to no vertical stretch, and that's okay. This one has close to 30% stretch, so it's nice and stretchy. These will be nice and comfortable. You do want something with a little bit of stretch, and you want something that is stable. So if you start moving towards really drapey things, you're probably not going to like the way, especially the bib looks. The waistband and straps are going to be really hard to keep nice and crisp. This is another stretch denim that I have. I'm not going to remember where I got all of these, but this has about the same amount of stretch feeling. Let's see. Yep. Close to 30%, 25 to 30%. So this is a lighter weight denim. Most of the stretch denims tend to be lighter weight compared to a non-stretch denim. This is a stretch chambray, and I just pulled it because it's a little bit different. You don't see it that often. I can't remember where I got it. But it's got quite a bit of stretch. I can see. About 20% stretch on this one. I'd say the average of all stretch wovens is going to be about 20% horizontally. And that's what the overalls were drafted for. So anything around there is going to be just perfect. If you grab something this one has a ton of stretch. This, I do remember this one. I think it was Robert Kaufman. And I don't think they make it anymore. I really loved this for SOS pants. It feels a little bit thicker, but it's super stretchy. The SOS require a little bit more stretch, and this one has a ton of stretch. I want to say like 50% after I just checked it. So a ton of stretch on that one. Alright, here's one more stretch denim, and then I'll leave that alone. I'm just showing that you can get a lot of different stretch denims. This one's super stretchy too. It doesn't have any vertical. None of these so far have had any vertical stretch, and that's okay. Yeah, this one has close to 50% too. So my last two were super stretchy. So those are just going to be slightly more comfortable. I tend to pick these higher stretch denims for my little ones, if I'm sewing anything for a stretch woven for my little ones, just because they tend to still, you know, bend up all super crazy like a puzzle, and sometimes they just like the extra stretch. For me, I also enjoy a higher stretch just because I'm bending down on the floor with my littles all day and squatting them to pick them up and things like that. I often still sit crisscross applesauce on the floor even as an adult, so I also like the higher stretch. Alright, moving on. Something else you can do that is a really fun fall wintry fabric is a stretch suede. I picked this one up at Joann's, I think. I don't know why I tend to remember that more than where I get the other ones. This one actually has a slight vertical stretch, which is nice. It'll be super comfortable to wear. Horizontally, it has about 30% stretch. Vertically, probably only about 10%. But even that 10% is really nice when, you know, you're bending and things like that. So stretch suede, that's a super fun option for fall winter looks. I just have one more here that is also a stretch suede. I'm just going to show, it's a little bit different, right? It's got more stretch horizontally, 0 vertically. So, you know, when you say certain fabrics work great, they're all can still be a little bit different. So these stretch suedes, even though they're both the same type of fabric as stretch suede, are going to feel a little bit different. The leopard will feel a little bit tighter when I'm just standing up because it's got less horizontal stretch. It's going to move with me a little bit better because it has the vertical stretch. While this one's not going to feel as tight just standing, but it's not going to move with me quite as well as the leopard. Both of them would work though. Okay, moving on. All of these were labeled a stretch twill that I have next. Now some stretch twill will not have very much stretch, but this one happened to have quite a bit. I know it's black, but hopefully you can still see. It's got about, let's see, probably about 30% horizontally, so a nice stretch horizontally. It's got none vertically, but again, for this pattern, that's okay. So these would make, I actually picked these up to do the pants version with no bib attached as just a modification for myself. And these will make some really great, nice, high-waisted slacks. And they'll stretch and they'll move with me, but they'll look really nice. It's always nice to have a really nice, well-fitted pair of black trousers in your closet. This I got from Hobby Lobby, and it is super cute. If I do say so myself. It's got 0 vertical stretch and quite a bit horizontally. Probably close to 30%, I'm guessing. I can do it real quick though. Yep, 25 to 30% is what I would say. And it's a nice weight, and it's just so cute, that little plaid. I actually bought this for my daughter. She said she really liked it. We'll see if she wears it. She picked that one. Here's one last stretch twill, 0 vertical stretch, quite a lot of horizontal stretch. And this was a little thinner than the black, but it would still work. It's just a little bit thinner. This is a fabric that I clearly remember buying from Raspberry Creek Fabrics, and I do not remember what kind of fabric it was. And I clearly remember buying it because I wanted to see how it feels. It feels a lot similar to this stretch twill that I have. 0 vertical, 0 horizontal stretch, and it's got all the stretch vertically. So you could cut these cross grain, or you could size up and still have the vertical stretch. Either way, some stretch wovens do stretch vertically, and that is so when you bend and things like that, you have the vertical stretch. Now, this vintage jumper has negative ease at the full hip, so you're going to have to size up if you're going to use something with 0 stretch horizontally. You can, but it's going to take a little bit of math and a little bit of figuring out exactly what size you need so that you do not have the negative ease. And then you will use the vertical stretch when you bend and move. Okay. Next up, this is a stretch corduroy. It doesn't have much stretch. It has the littlest stretch of all the fabrics I pulled today. It is still considered a stretch woven, and I would say it has closer to 15% stretch, might have 20% stretch. So these ones are going to feel the tightest. And since it probably has a lot less spandex, they're going to feel very tight when I put them on, and then as I wear them out the day, they're probably going to loosen up like a traditional non-stretch jean does. So if you pick something with higher spandex that is going to be stretchier, it's not going to feel as tight, and it's not going to loosen throughout the day. If you pick something like this that only has a little bit of stretch, it will feel tighter, and then it will kind of relax with wear. So whatever your preference is there. I picked a couple non-traditional ones right here. These are not stretch wovens. These are knits that I think will probably work pretty well. I already made one for my daughter in just a very stable knit, and it's a little harder to get all of those things looking nice and crisp as a stretch woven does, like the corners of your bib, that waistband, the corner of the waistband where your button is, things like that. But they were very cute. They were very cute. You can get more kid-friendly prints that way. Hers were pink, and she loved that. So that is an option if you're not finding any stretch wovens that you or the little one that you're sewing for is in love with. That is an option is to use a very stable knit. You do want it to be stable. You don't want anything too drapey. But here are a few examples of ones that I think would work pretty well. One is a stable French terry. You probably want to stay away from any kind of rayon French terries because they tend to be a lot drapier and not as stable. But this has the stretch that you need, and this one has very little to zero vertical stretch, and it's just pretty stable. I think this would do great with it. One thing you can do if you fear your fabric isn't stable enough is you can interface that piece with some very lightweight knit interfacing, and it will give it a little more body and stability. But of course, you're not going to want to interface the entire skirt or anything like that. So if you're looking for that more stable silhouette, you're going to want to pick something more stable. Okay, this one that I picked to show that I think would work is Ponte. It's got a nice stretch horizontally, and it actually has some vertically as well. But it's nice and stable. It's got, Ponte usually has a high spandex content, so it won't grow with you. So it might not feel as tight as a stretch woven, but at least it's not going to grow on you or your little one as you wear it. And Ponte, Liverpool, Scuba, those are all fairly similar. Those tend to be pretty easy, same as French terry, pretty easy to find different colors, prints, things like that to make anybody happy if they're not liking the solids that are more easily found in a stretch woven. The last one I pulled is this really stable cotton jersey. It's thin, so it would be thin, but it's only got, let's see, (25 to 30% stretch horizontally and 0 vertically. So it's a very stable jersey. I think these would also do great. This by no means is all of the fabric that is available that you could use, but this is what I happen to have in my stash and the things that I kind of started pulling to use. So I hope that helps. I hope you have some stuff in your stash, and if not, it's really not too hard to find some great stretch wovens these days. And I'm going to talk really quickly about interfacing and the new vintage jumper. It calls for some interfacing on certain pieces, and we're going to talk about how important it is, on which piece, what kind you want, and things like that. Interfacing is one of those things where we get a lot of questions about it. There's a lot of kinds of interfacing. This project is going to be super simple to find the right kind of interfacing because there isn't that much available for this particular kind. What you're going to want is a knit stretch interfacing. We're using a stretch woven here, and it's really important that we don't lose the stretch, especially on the waistband piece. The waistband piece is really snug and fitted. It's what gives it that nipped in waist, which is super flattering. But to have it that fitted, you need a little bit of stretch so that when you move around, the fabric has a little bit of give and you're comfortable. So what I have here is called Fusing It. It's basically the only kind of stretch interfacing you can find. Knit interfacing, stretch interfacing, fusing it, tricot, are all the different names that I've seen associated with it, but it's all the same thing. You're not going to really have to worry about light, medium, heavy, different numbers, all of that, because every time I've ever ordered or bought any kind of knit interfacing, it's this exact same kind. So if it says knit, if it says it has stretch, that's the one that you want. Don't worry about brands, numbers, how heavy or light it is. This is the one choice, so it's nice and easy that way. And I'm going to show you, it doesn't have any vertical stretch, but horizontally it has quite a lot of stretch. So this is perfect for this project. We want to stabilize that waistband so it's not stretching out on us as we're sewing it, because it is a little bit tricky of a sew to get it nice and perfect and clean on the front and the back. But we don't want to lose the stretch because there's zero ease at the waist. It gives it a nice fitted, tucked in vintage look right at your natural waist. But then when you move and bend, you want the little bit of stretch to be comfortable. Baby girl telling me I'm doing a good job. I also have here just some light featherweight regular interfacing. It does have a slight, very, very, very slight stretch, but nothing like our knit interfacing. If you try to put this on stretch fabric and then the fabric stretches, what will happen is this will come off and rip off the fabric, and then it's not interfaced anymore. What I'm going to mention though is if you do not have any knit interfacing, if you're using a very stable fabric, it is fine to skip the interfacing as long as you're not worried about your waistband stretching out or having a hard time ironing the piece. It's really important you get a nice crisp press when you're making this waistband. It makes it much, much easier. So if you're using a more stable knit for these instead of a stretch woven that has a good nice crease when you press it and holds its shape really well, you're really not going to want to skip the interfacing on that waistband. Same thing with the straps. We recommend cutting interfacing for the straps depending on your fabric. If you're using something like a stretch denim that only has a little bit of stretch horizontally, no vertical stretch, it holds its shape really well, it presses really nicely, you can easily skip the interfacing in the straps. If you're using, let's say, a Liverpool, French terry, maybe a jegging fabric that has much more stretch, or a suede that doesn't have the same kind of recovery, maybe, all of those you're not going to want to skip it. If you do skip it on those, your straps will end up getting longer and longer and longer, and they'll start falling off your shoulders when you're wearing it, which is never comfortable. So, very stable stretch woven that you're not worried about stretching out. It's okay to skip. Anything else, don't skip it on those straps or they'll keep falling off of you and it'll be uncomfortable. And they won't turn, press, and top stitches nicely if it's not a really stable, nice, crisp press fabric. If you can't find the knit interfacing, you have a really stable fabric that presses really nicely, you're not worried about the waistband or the straps, there are a few other spots that you do not want to skip interfacing and that you can use the regular non-stretch interfacing. The spots that you really don't want to skip are where your buttonholes are. So if I'm going to grab my piece, this is my daughter's piece. So I have the buttonholes marked here, And what I do is I just cut a very generous size rectangle or square shape, and I just press it there on my bib. I do it on the lining and the main. It makes your buttonhole feed through your machine much easier. It also will make sure that that buttonhole keeps its shape as they're popping the buttons in and out. So very important, never skip. And it's okay if you're just using a tiny square to use the regular interfacing. Although if you have the knit interfacing, it will hold better with wear and tear than the regular, because your fabric can and will be stretched. And again, the knit tricot interfacing will stretch with it and stay with your fabric. Whereas this one, if it stretches too much, it'll pop off and rip, and it won't be bonded to the fabric anymore. Another place is where your buttons are. So the very end of the straps, if you don't end up using interfacing on your straps, you're going to want to use interfacing just right here at the end where your buttons are going to be. And that's because that button usually gets pulled an awful lot when you're putting them on and off. And you just want to strengthen that part of the fabric, make sure it's nice and strong. Again, you have a buttonhole and a button on the waistband. If you're not using interfacing on the waistband already, do not skip where your buttonhole and your button are going to be. Add the interfacing there. Last but not least, if you are using a fabric with vertical stretch, most stretch wovens do not have vertical stretch. So most stretch wovens, you're not going to have to worry about this. But if you're using a more stable knit or just maybe like a jegging fabric that has some vertical stretch, then you're going to want to add a little strip of interfacing, about an inch on each side of where your zipper is going to be. This will keep your fabric from stretching out as you're sewing in that zipper. If it stretches out, it'll become a little wavy. You'll have too much length there. You'll have wrinkles there. You're not going to be happy with the way it looks. Anytime you're sewing in a zipper in fabric that has vertical stretch, you always want to interface that area to make sure it's not stretching, because your zipper will not stretch. So you want your fabric to not stretch there as well while you're sewing it in. All right. I hope that answers all the questions you might have about interfacing, what is preferred, which is the knit interfacing in the waistband straps, anywhere you have a buttonhole, zipper if you have vertical stretch in your fabric. And if you can't find it, if you don't have it, if you're dying to make these up and you don't have it in your stash, you can use the lighter weight regular woven interfacing in a few spots, like buttonholes and bibs, buttonholes and buttons, and zipper if it has vertical stretch. But other than that, it's going to pop off and it's not going to work. And you have to choose a fabric that's more stable, that doesn't need the interfacing as much if you're going to skip it. All right, guys, I hope you're ready to order or pick up some knit interfacing and get started on these vintage jumpers. They're so fun to wear, and I hope you enjoy it as much as we have.